Hey everyone, today we're going to take a quick look at the Japanese natural whetstone called Binsui. It is a Nakatoishi stone in the analogous grit range of 1000 to 3000 grit when using the Japanese whetstone grit scale. It is readily available in the marketplace. It is still mined as of 2022. And it's on the cheaper end of available Japanese whetstones, maybe for 2022 in the range of $80 to $150. It's a pretty consistent stone. It has a lot of tradition behind it as one of the early stones in sword polishing, and it works very well on a variety of knife steels, whether you're talking about stainless steel, powdered steels, or your more traditional white, blue Japanese steel knives. It does a very good job at the earlier level of works, early to mid-level works on all of those knives. So we're going to go ahead and get our example here wet, and as we let it soak up a little bit of water, we'll just talk about the stone a little bit. It is from the Kyushu area, which is the same area that another very common whetstone comes from, which is called Amakusa. When you're comparing the two, Binsui is the superior stone. They do share some properties insofar as their composition, how they feel, but Amakusa has a greater variety of grit throughout the stone, so it's a less consistent stone, and tends to be a little bit coarser. But that consistency is really what you want at this range, and the Binsui is the superior product for that. Amakusas can still be interesting. They do come in two varieties, with the white Amakusa or Shiro Amakusa being far closer to the Binsui. But in general, I've personally found the Binsui is worth a little bit extra for the level of consistency. Other than that, this is a good example of Binsui. There are a lot of different versions of it floating around. Again, they're all from the same mine, but of course you get different stones from the mine and different qualities of those stones. So what I look for when I'm looking for good Binsui is I like the tanner pattern. I think tends to be more consistent rather than the very, very white pattern, which can have more likely to have like sand inclusions. Not really a firm rule, that's more my own anecdotal experience. Some more firm rules though is the higher quality Binsui, like this one, does not have gray dots. There is Binsui that has gray dots, which is similar to Amakusa stones. And if you can find Binsui without the gray dots, you're far more likely to get very good quality Binsui. Similarly, these like maroon, reddish, almost, at least to my eyes, patterns on the stone often are also on very nice Binsui. So those are some things that you can look for when you consider potentially trying to track down a copy of the stone yourself. Now, as Binsui compares to other Japanese natural whetstones, and Nakatoishi in particular, it tends to be a little bit on the harder side. That's a pro and a con, of course. The pro is that it doesn't wear as fast. So the stone, will give you a little bit more feedback because it's not giving as much to the blade. It will wear probably more evenly as long as you go across the surface because it's wearing slower, and it'll last you longer. Those are the main benefits. Some of the disbenefits are that it can be a little bit more finicky about getting a nice even polish across your blade, because with harder stones, it's more on you to make sure that the areas of your blade, whether you're polishing or you're sharpening, are making that equal contact. So a softer stone, like a soft Numata or Ikarashi, might be easier to use because they are more likely to give way and adjust to your blade's, minorly different geometry across the edge, whether that's, again, sharpening or polishing. So In most Nakatoishi, we're going to find ourselves using either a natural Nagura or a diamond plate, which today we are going to use a diamond plate for our little presentation here. You could use a Binsui Tomo Nagura. They're not hard to find. Or you just buy 2 Binsui and chop one up for Nagura. That would work too. But in this case, I almost always prefer the diamond plates for the early Nakatoishi in particular. So let's go ahead and generate some slurry here. As you might have been able to see, the stone has some thirst to it, but it's not super thirsty. That is one of the other differences between Binsui and Amakusa, as Amakusa tends to be extremely thirsty, versus Binsui, I mean, we really just kind of went over it 2 times, and the water is now, you know, sitting, resting on the surface. So let's go ahead and generate slurry. We don't need a whole lot. For polishing here, I mean, the surface would have cut our blade without slurrying, whether we were actually polishing or sharpening. It would have generated, you know, black particles. It would have generated swarf. But I like to add the slurry, especially for polishing, just this little tiny bit of layer, because it gives us some extra lubrication when we're running the blade over. Again, whether sharpening or polishing, I think it makes a large difference on test polishing, which is what I'm going to do. It'll show you the properties of the stone better. And it also helps to not have the stone clog up as fast. So anyway, let's take a look. So due to its hardness, because it's less likely to give up new layers of abrasive particles on its own, Binsui does exhaust itself faster, in my experience, and most Binsui is hard. So most of it exhausts itself fairly quickly. I mean, you can still see that we're getting very good cutting action from it, but there are some Nakatoishi middle grit stones that I don't feel I have to almost refresh at all once I get that initial slurry going and work the stone, versus Binsui, I definitely, you know, if I want to really get a nice even finish, or I'm doing 2 sides to a small knife like this, or one side of a very larger knife, I'm going to have to refresh the surface with that diamond plate or with a Nagura, because it's just not going to keep cutting. One last thing I actually forgot to mention now that we're working on it, when you're looking for good quality Binsui, is a less hole filled surface. So you can see with this stone, it doesn't have holes in its surface. It's very consistent across it. Lower quality Binsui, in my experience, has more holes within the surface of the stone. So let's go ahead and I'm going to make another run at it. I'm just going to generate another quick layer of slurry. Mud. We're making the slurry by working the blade. So this won't be a perfect polish job. We've only been on the blade, on the stone for a couple minutes here, but the goal is to show you the scratch pattern it leaves, what you could expect from the stone yourself, and hopefully you'll be able to compare it to other stones as we take these quicker looks at some other ones. So let's go ahead and get the stone, or get the knife dried off here. We can take a look at what it gave us. All right. So it gave us a pretty good scratch pattern. You can see it's fairly consistent across the surface of the knife. It is an early stage Nakatoishi stone, so There are visible scratches both on the cladding and the core steel. This is a, when we talk about like better Binsui versus lesser quality Binsui, so the gray dots, the holes, the color, this is a, with this being a higher quality one, it also means it tends to be more analogous to a higher grit. So while Binsui can be a 1,000 to 3,000 stone, this one really is in the higher end of that range. I don't think it's a 3,000 stone equivalent, but it's past a 1,000 without much doubt. So you can take a look for yourself and make your own judgments. I'll try to get as close as possible here. And some of that unevenness is going to be on me. It's user error, or really we haven't spent as much time on the stone as we would need, but this gives you as much of an example, I think, as you really need. All right. So that was us just doing a quick polishing session on it. Of course, you could spend more time. As for how it sharpens, it's easy. Let's go ahead and just totally refresh the stone so that you all can have a look at what type of swarf and how quick it generates it just on the core steel. Again, just a little bit. So you can see it does a decent job for a natural whetstone. That's acceptable. It's middle ground for an early Nakatoishi. I wouldn't say it's an amazingly fast cutter, but it is not slow either way. And the blade edge, which you guys are not going to be able to feel, obviously, it's toothy. I mean, it leaves a toothy cutting edge, but very serviceable. If you're not looking to grind chips out or warps out of a blade, this would be a great place or a great whetstone if you're looking for a full natural progression to start on to refresh your bevel on your knives and get them, prepared for maybe the next step or steps of refinement, depending on what the knife is used for. As for any other uses the Binsui might have, certain Binsui whetstones can be used to set bevels on razors. I've used this stone to set bevels on razors successfully. It's never, even the really good versions of it like this, it's never going to be my favorite whetstone to do that on for razors. It is manageable, but I would choose other stones. And on that note as well, lower quality Binsui cannot set bevel on razors. It's really only these ones that are a bit nicer and a bit finer on the finer end of the scale. So, unless if you get one of those versions by comparing the looks or getting good feedback, good polishing examples from a vendor, I would avoid looking at Binsui as a potential for setting a bevel on a razor. But obviously anything that is, more accepting of a coarser stone than a knife, so tools, scissors, etc., or early stages for certain one of those, the Binsui will be a perfectly acceptable stone for those as well. So if you can find a good version of it, I think it's a great entry point into Japanese natural whetstones. I think it can be a lot of fun to just try out, and while compared to synthetics, it is a bit expensive. This stone, which if we take a look at the side of it, this stone would last even heavy uses. You are going to get 300 plus sessions of it out of even using it really, really seriously with a lot of slurry built up and a lot of work on it. You could get thousands of uses out of it if all you're doing is just sharpening a knife every now and then. So it can outlast, of course, a synthetic like most natural whetstones will. Well, anyway, that's our overview of Binsui. The goal will kind of be to do this for more whetstones and give you the ability to kind of like open, two videos and compare the scratch patterns and get a feel for yourself, as well as just a better understanding of what these individual and more name-known whetstones are used for. So anyway, thanks for watching, and until next time.